When you hear the words Resident Evil 5, you often think guns, explosions, bigger guns, more explosions, but you would never think scary. And today I'd like to tell you about Resident Evil 5's Lost and Nightmares DLC that serves to fill in the gaps of the Spencer Mansion incident. No, the other Spencer Mansion incident. That's the one. I think it's a largely forgotten piece of Resident Evil 5's history, and honestly a bit of a fascinating insight into what the series could have been had it stuck to its horror roots. Hi, I'm Tally, I love Resident Evil 5, and I'll be talking about Resident Evil 5 today. While this is a short DLC, I feel like it captures a lot of the early creepiness of the series as it pays homage to Resident Evil 1 and the remake in setting and tone. The game sees certified stud and ex-fastest thing alive Chris Redfield and my favourite sandwich Jill Valentine explore a mansion which should look very familiar. It's a living tribute to the original Spencer Mansion, and in this tribute it carries tons of creepy vibes. I think my favourite thing about this DLC is that it's like super upfront about its absolutely shameless nods to the original games. Allow me to list every reference that I spotted and you can comment if I missed any. The main room is just the main hall from Resident Evil 1. If you walk through a door, it's in first person. The Itchy Tasty Diary. Moonlight Sonata. Playing a piano to open a door that has a shield-shaped key in it. The dog hallway. Jill picking locks. And a fallen ceiling trap. The game really does pay as much tribute to the original RE1 and R remake as much as it can, and I respect that. I didn't even mention that if you check the door 3 times you get the classic Resident Evil camera angles and control scheme. It's pretty awesome. Classic Resident Evil fellatio aside, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of this DLC. As you explore the super eerie top floor of the mansion, you uncover classic style puzzles as you hunt down 3 passwords for a computer that gives you a really interesting piece of lore that gives insight into the Wesker project. One of these passwords you'll find by turning on the power to the top floor and heading to the bedroom. You'll find it by reading a familiar memo that ends with a familiar line. You'll also find a gun in this room, but you won't be using it too much for the foreseeable. On the same floor you're going to find a broken hallway that Jill can be yeeted over to unlock the dining room, where you'll find another note and a fireplace, but nothing too crazy. Unless you're playing on veteran mode, but more on that later. Then, after you walk up a set of stairs into the piano room, you grab the key for the dog hallway. While I'm summarising this, I do want everyone to know this was creepy the entire way. The soundtrack is just ominous noises, crashes, steps creaking, the distant echoes of animals, and at one point, a piano with no player. You're then led down the hallway into a room with some more guns and some heat-sensitive paper. Now, this isn't the most huge brain puzzle, but I bet there's a ton of players out there that might have missed the fire on the first run through. Once you find these 3 passwords, a door into the spike ceiling room opens up, forcing the first bit of action as you run to the lever to save Jill from her imminent demise. And your prize for all of this? A crank! God damn, how could I forget that the crank is a reference? Anyway, this is all the action for the first floor, but I'm going to talk about it for another minute. The first floor really is nothing but atmosphere, which I loved. I had nearly 10 years between playthroughs for this, which makes me feel old. But also, it made me forget that the danger in this is all in your head. Because it's so reminiscent of the original classic games, I just expected something creepy around every corner. And by the way, these corners are claustrophobic, these rooms are tight, and this caused me to spend my entire first playthrough of this physically tense. Like genuinely tense, ready to jump. Now I don't know if I'm just easy to frighten, but I felt like it made the experience better for me. Now, I mentioned earlier that there's no enemies here, which is true on standard and easy. Veteran though introduces you to the campaign's main enemy, the Blob, which I love. I love this because the general progression for most players, myself included, is standard then veteran, so by following this progression you walk into the DLC confident that you cannot be fucked with because you've played it the first time. Then the game fucks with you by adding this new layer of chaos to deal with. And after recording footage for this video, I actually found out that once you complete the DLC the first time, you will start to find the Blob in Standard too. I found mine after rescuing Jill, and yes, it did fuck me up. But now I've talked about the top floor plenty, so let's take a dive straight into hell. And by hell, I mean the prison area, which is where the main brunt of the action starts. In this area, you're going to be introduced to the Blob properly. The Blob, as it's cutely named, is somewhat of a spiritual successor to Lisa Trevor, but without the tragic backstory and pants-pissing terror that hearing that mother caused me through every playthrough I've ever played. Quick lore thought. I think these are also partially created using the G virus, since it has that classic extra eye that G started and everyone else copied. These are enemies that are more than capable of one-shotting you if you get too close. And while these monsters aren't unkillable, they are most definitely tanky and they will take as much as you can throw at them. And truthfully, that's the hardest thing about this area. It's short and the puzzles aren't really that hard, but you're given added pressure by having two one-shotting tanks chasing you throughout the area, which made me nervous the first time, but truthfully it gets less impactful on every subsequent playthrough because you realise they're kind of pushovers. Once you've escaped the prison area, you fall ass first into a sewery dungeon. Also, you happen to have lost all weapons that you've accrued until this point. Delightful. What's more delightful is that you have to run, dodge and lure 3 more blobs into these fallen spike traps. A beautiful point of irony that these twisted traps are turned on the product of the monster that made them. This isn't a hard task, but it can be tedious because the enemy AI isn't what you would call smart. Not in the slightest. Then, you climb up some stairs, grab a familiar handgun, and you enter a familiar scene with a familiar blonde bad boy. Now this boss has 2 outcomes. One of them involves you lasting against Wesker as long as you can until the fight just kinda ends and he gets bored of you.
Until the movie just sort of ends.
It lasts a few minutes and your goal is just to stay away until the timer runs out, which mirrors the original fight in RE5, so it's like Star Wars.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
You also do have the option to beat the ever-loving shit out of him, and if you deal enough damage, he'll take a knee and the cutscene's gonna play out. There's not too much difference between either endings other than an achievement. And now that the summary is over, I think there's a reason that this DLC is kind of forgotten or lost. It doesn't really leave a lasting impact on the player. The first time leaves a huge impression, but it doesn't have the overall replayability to cement it in the core of your brain, right next to flashes of memories about TV shows that you can't tell if they existed or were just figments of your 5-year-old imagination. The only real reason to play it again is for the veteran achievement, and then if you never touch it again, I kind of understand. But would I recommend this DLC? Yeah. If you have the golden edition and you haven't touched it for a while, pick it up, you'll find it's fun. If you don't have it, then it goes on sale every once in a while, and it's definitely worth like the £4 that it costs to pick it up. You've really got nothing to lose by trying it out. To wrap things up though, I found this super fun, and it tickled something inside me that I didn't know could be tickled. I had a good time both reliving the game and recording for it. Definitely check it out. As always, if you like the video, please make sure to give it a like. If you love it, give it a share and tell everyone you know about the channel. Today, since you've made it this far into the video, I would like you to comment Blob. Everyone else will get it, but the people who haven't watched won't. Anyway, you've been amazing. I have been Tally. I will catch you all later. Bye.